But how did we get to an important stage or an important part of the economy, such as the artisanal small-scale mining sector, where such a significant part is so stigmatized? How did we get to this?
Yeah, I think this question too, I mean, just to also underline that yes, the sector has significant economic importance in Ghana. I think last year, for the first time, if I'm not wrong, the small-scale mining sector had almost half of or more than half of the nation's entire gold output, right? So we can see that, yes, there's indeed a huge economic significance that cannot just be downplayed. And also in terms of employment, in Ghana, around 12 million people have direct employment in the sector. And 4 million people derive jobs from it indirectly, which also shows that it's really embedded in the local economy, and it has an impact and importance for a lot of people, despite all the issues and the shortcomings. And how did we get here? I think we need to look back in history and understand how contemporary mining regimes across the continent and also probably across the broader global south emerged, right? And one aspect that shaped this emergence were the structural adjustment programs in the 1980s, or the 1980s, which also came to be known as the decade of structural adjustment, which is where countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America underwent structural adjustment programs under the auspices of the IMF and the World Bank. And the SAPs were comprehensive economic reforms, and the mining sector was also target of these economic reforms, right? And I'll just refer to the Ghanaian background, because this is what I'm most familiar with. And what's happened in Ghana in terms of the small-scale sector was that the structural adjustment program, how it commenced in 1983 under the economic recovery program, it instated like this prioritization on the large-scale mining sector, right? So the mines which were formerly nationally owned were all privatized, and foreign capital was invited, right? And there was this idea that, you know, if you invite foreign capital, the sector will be more productive, and then it will solve all the economic crisis that Ghana was also facing at that time, right? And this didn't happen in a vacuum, and it also crucially impacted the ASM sector, right? Because now there was this competition between also foreign mining companies, which had a lot of equipment, capital, all those things that the small-scale miners didn't have, right? So it was during this time that the small-scale mining sector actually became marginalized. The states would now prefer to give concessions to foreign companies. Small-scale miners were displaced from the lands where they had mined on largely undisturbed in the previous times, because ASM is not a new emergence, right? It has been there for quite some time. And one thing that was also very paradox, because in 1989, small-scale mining was actually legalized for the first time, but it created this paradoxical situation that the legalization actually set the stage for the sector's current marginalization, right? This is also I think one of our key findings with our research at CDD, that yes, the sector was legalized, which sounded nice, but there was no mechanisms put in place to actually give support to the sector, right? So small-scale miners would get the less economically viable lands, because the economically viable concessions were also reserved for the industrial mines. They also couldn't get the equipment that they needed, because they also couldn't access capital, because the sector is stigmatized, right? So there's also reluctance on the side of banks to even give financing to this sector. So this is, I think, just a very brief sum up of how we got here today, that this sector is so marginalized and also criminalized, because the legal regimes that were put in place simply didn't reflect the realities in the sector, and the reality that most people were also like driven by economic hardship and poverty into this sector, right? And then today we have licensing regimes where a small-scale mining license costs like about, I think the latest figure I heard was around $3,000, which is a lot for someone in the sector to comply with, right? So yeah, I think this is just a brief background of how we got here.